Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and I'd like to introduce a very special guest. His name is Alan Weiss. He's a PhD, a consultant, speaker, and author, and he's got a consulting firm, Summit Consulting Group. He's worked with more than 500 leading organizations, including Merck, Hewlett-Packard, GE, Mercedes, and more. He's a sought-after speaker at major conferences, and he's published more than 60 books, many of which have been on the curricula at top business schools. His new book is The Courage of Your Talents and How to Build Self-Esteem, Trust Your Own Judgment, and Constantly Succeed in Business and Life. Alan, welcome to the show. It sounds like you have been around the block a few times.
I have to admit that I have, but I'm not getting tired, Joe. I'm okay.
Well, that's good. I love to bring wisdom into this show. And, we focus on healthy living, and that's a big topic, mind, body, spirit. And you talk a lot about self-esteem and confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. All of those things are extremely important in how we live our life. Before we get into your book and all of your work, I'm always curious to know, what brought you to this?
Well, I'll give you the short version.
All
Uh,
right.
I've been a consultant for decades, and I went out on my own in '85 when I was fired as president of the consulting firm. I was fired because the owner and I hated each other. And
Oh,
so
reasonable.
I decided I would never be fired again. And my wife said, fine, but you better get serious. And so I started my own practice.
Uh-huh.
I started to write some books based on my practice. And I drew those large corporate organizations you talked about, very kind people, and they referred me to other people.
Okay.
And my fourth book was called Confessions of a Consultant, and it was rejected 15 times. But my agent showed up at McGraw-Hill, and they said, look, we don't care about Confessions of a Consultant, but can this guy tell you and tell our readers how he makes $1 million plus a year as a solo consultant, in 1990? And my agent said, yes, he can. And he got an advance. And here I am, 57 books later, $1 million is on the shelves for 37 years, and it's sixth edition. So I moved, I emigrated, I morphed I migrated, I should say, from corporate work to individual work. And now I work with entrepreneurs all over the world. I have the strongest solo consulting brand in the world. I've worked with
Wow.
people in entertainment and in sports and in business and in nonprofits and even religious institutions. But what's occurred to me in the past 3 or 4 years is that there was a crisis in self-esteem. It was a problem to begin with, and then COVID hit. And now we have a world where people don't trust politicians, they don't trust medical people, they don't trust their representatives. And on top of all that, you've got the internet with all kinds of opinions posing as facts. And so
Sure.
people don't trust their own judgment, Joe, and that's the problem.
I couldn't agree with you more. When the internet first started coming out, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be everything. And I always even thought, it's going to make things easy. But when you had to go and hunt for information, there was a better chance it was going to be good information. And now it just gets poured at you from all directions, and you don't know what the heck is what anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And of course, in terms of healthy living, the more confident you are, the more you believe in your own judgment, the more resilient you are to correct errors, the healthier you're going to be. Otherwise, it creates stress, and stress results in a hell of a lot of illness.
100%. I'm living testimony to that. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, the will to accomplish something and knowing that you can is just paramount. You can literally do anything if you have those two pieces and are willing to take action.
Well, it's not what happens to us, it's what we do about it.
Exactly.
And if we're going to do the right thing, we have to have that kind of confidence in our judgment and that kind of resilience. And we can't expect other people to take care of us. We have to expect to take care of ourselves.
So, I mean, I have seldom interviewed authors that have written as prolifically as you. I've interviewed a lot of authors, but anywhere from 1 to 10 books is sort of a normal body of work. You're well beyond that. How is it that you find yourself able to just put out so much content that way?
I get this question all the time. So my immediate response is I tell people that I go for volume and not accuracy.
I love it.
Right? And some
Shotgun
people,
approach.
2 out of 10 people say, well, what does that mean exactly? Right?
Right.
So, but I believe that you grow by building on strength, not by correcting weaknesses. And my strengths are writing and speaking. So when
Okay.
I got fired, I started writing and speaking. And today, with the strongest solo consulting brand in the world, I'm still writing and speaking. So I find it's easy to write books. I find it's a good way to express myself. I find there's a huge appetite for them. And consequently, I've again migrated away from business books and consulting books. I mean, I've written more books on consulting than anyone ever, but
Wow.
I've gone toward the human condition. I've gone toward what I see as entrepreneurial and executive needs in terms of making sense of what they see around them. And those books are easy to write because there's social proof all over the place, right?
Right.
You have scientific writers like Malcolm Gladwell and Dan Pink, nice guys, great guys. Then you have
Sure.
anecdotal writers like Seth Godin and Marshall Goldsmith and me. And so when you
Right.
write anecdotally, you just need social proof. And there's so much around us that it's easy to do.
Right. I like that. I guess that's one of the good things about the information age is that everybody's stories are out there at your fingertips nowadays.
Isn't that the truth? All you have to do is, take a look around you and you
Yeah,
say, well, that's a good example or a bad example.
exactly. So as you're going along in the early days and you're consulting, you're giving people advice, you're saying, hey, you're doing this, but you're trying to get there. Maybe this is a better way, or maybe you ought to try this. There's so many factors involved in success, I mean, there's talent, there's the ideas, there's in originality and the need of a product or service, all of these things. And then you've got self-esteem as one of these factors. What lit up self-esteem as kind of this driving or most important key?
When I asked myself why people weren't trusting their judgment anymore, I found an interesting comparison, and that is people confuse esteem with ego. They're
Oh,
very different. Ego is an external creation, the way we want people to view us. And so it's what we wear and what we say and where we go and what we believe in and so forth. And ego can be smashed. It's fragile. Somebody comes along and says, hey, you're wrong about that. Or a book comes along and says, why should we listen to you? You have a bad experience. So ego can be fragile and it can be knocked down from the outside, external sources. But esteem is internal. And the reason esteem declines is we neglect to build it. We neglect to sustain it. And that's all about us. It's how we speak to ourselves. And we suffer an absolutely egregious problem when we feel cut off and when we feel uncertain. So COVID did that.
right.
And foreign wars do that. And economic fluctuations do that. And AI has done that. And the job market changing. I could go on and on and on. And
Sure.
consequently, especially in these newer generations, I mean, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's hard to scare me today about anything once you look
Yeah,
at that.
absolutely.
So, I'm not worried about AI taking over the world. Not a concern I have. So Joe, I'd rather be Paul Revere than Chicken Little. That's where I am.
I agree. I'm right there with you. I think we think a lot alike, although you've certainly done a lot more with it than I have. You're dealing with entrepreneurs now. As a lifetime entrepreneur, I've always kind of had that, well, it's a great idea. Let's just go for it. And if I fall, I'll get back up and try again. I don't know that I've suffered a self-esteem issue, but I'm not a very good businessman. So I fall a lot and learn a lot, but go on my way about it. Do you find that entrepreneurs does that sound unusual, or is that a pretty common story when you're talking about consulting entrepreneurs and self-esteem being a big issue?
Well, it's a common story with successful entrepreneurs. I mean, the whole thing about resilience, right? If you look at great leaders, they make
Hmm.
tough decisions and they're resilient, right? They look for respect, not affection. People who are looking at affection, should get a dog. Uh,
Yeah,
I have two dogs. So
I have a bunch of dogs. I got
there
all
you
the
go.
affection I could ever want. Yeah.
There you go. But from other people, you want respect. And I define resilience as the ability to bounce forward.
Hmm.
You don't go back and establish defensive positions and dig trenches. You bounce forward. You learn from what's going on. And it takes a lot of confidence to do that. Now, confidence to me is the feeling, the assurance that you can meet or exceed someone's objectives, even if you haven't done that exact thing before. And
Hmm.
so when I got into the corporate world and I did so well with those large companies, they might ask, well, Alan, we need some organizational change here. And my response, well, of course, I can do that. And I figured I either knew how to do it, I could learn how to do it, right? And I knew what my boundaries were. I'm not interested in finance. I'm not interested in technology. I stayed out of there. But I stayed within the boundaries of what I'm really good at. And so you build on these strengths. And I think you have to understand that you have to set your own direction here. And the ability to understand that you make errors, we all make errors, and you can use them as learning points and keep going forward is what sets the speed.
Absolutely. So maybe give me an example in your life. You've been and done so many things. I'm sure you came upon a spot where you just completely fell flat on your face and you were faced with that moment of, okay, what am I going to do with it? And is it going to set me back or am I going to bounce forward, as you say?
Yeah, well, those are easy, unfortunately, to remember. So I'll give you an early one. I was doing a program at a big bank in New York, and I had, like 20 young managers ahead of me, in front of me, a shirt and tie on. I had, three easel charts, and I was going to show them how to make better decisions. And I was so nervous about this. And it was an afternoon and then a morning. And the coordinator insisted on taking me to lunch. I didn't want to go to lunch. I did it. And I was so nervous, I was shaking. And about 5 minutes in, I turned around too fast. I hit the first easel. It knocked over the other two.
Oh,
All the
no.
markers went flying across the floor, and everybody's just staring at me. So
Oh, boy.
laboriously, I reset the easels like that, and I went on. And then the next morning, it went a little better. It wasn't great, a little better. And I said to the coordinator after the second morning there, how did you people feel? And he said, well, the consensus was they were surprised you came back the next day.
There you
And
go.
so what I learned was that you're your own worst enemy when you
Yeah,
get yourself all agitated because nobody wants to sit in a room to hear someone and deliberately tear them apart unless they have a psychotic problem, right? Uh,
yeah.
Basically, they want you to succeed. 'Cause they want to say, I spent a good morning listening to a very interesting person. So the audience is with you. So I said to myself, I can't get so nervous as if I'm facing the enemy. These
Right.
people are with me unless I lose it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I learned from that horrible
That's a
beginning.
great lesson. I know years ago when I was a little kid, I was playing piano in a recital and I messed up something and something told me just keep going. And I just kept going and nobody noticed. And I learned that lesson that like you just like nobody's criticizing you that much. They don't really give a care if you make a little mess up. And I've taken that with me wherever I go. I mess up all the time. I just keep going and 99% of the time nobody ever catches it.
You're absolutely correct. And one of the things that I talk about in my books is that life is about success, not perfection. We have never taken a perfect plane ride, a perfect car ride, had a perfect dinner, had a perfect entertainment experience. There's always something that's imperfect, but that's
Right.
life. And so if
Yeah,
you use the wrong metric and perfection's your metric, you never get anywhere.
exactly. Yeah, here's something that comes up a lot is people's thought processes in the sense of, there's some people go around life looking at possibility and hope and all the good things. You look at life at a garden and you see all the beautiful flowers and the sun coming off it. Other people see the bugs and the problems and the just, never ending, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong. What would you say in that scenario? Like, how important is it to put your mind on maybe better things?
Well, I'll tell you two things. The first is sort of strategy, second is tactics. And the first is this. There's some people who get up in the morning and say, "Oh God, another day. I have bills to pay. I have to ask for some referrals. I hate asking for referrals. I've got to make some tough decisions, have unpleasant conversations." In other words, it's a long, slow crawl through enemy territory, right?
Right.
Other people get up and say, "Hey, what a great day. I'm sure there are a lot of opportunities today. I wonder what I'll tackle first."
Yeah.
And that's what starts their day. The
Right.
second thing I'll tell you tactically is very important. And I talk about this in the book extensively. And there's even a self-test in the book you can take, and you send it in, and I give you feedback on it. And that is this: we have to learn to isolate negatives and to generalize positives. And so if I don't get a sale, I don't say I'm a lousy marketer, which is a generalization. I say, on this day with this person in this place, I didn't get a sale. I say,
Right.
right? Conversely, if I get the sale, I don't say, hey, I got lucky. I say, I am a great marketer. I
Okay.
generalize that. Now, the drama in this is if you think of kids, if you say to a kid on the athletic field, God, you're awkward out there, they're
Right.
never going to gravitate towards sports. But if you say nobody could have made that kick, don't worry about it. See, the
Yeah.
first generalization of a negative, the second's an isolation of a negative.
Yeah.
They get 100 in a history test. You don't say, what'd you do, cheat? You say,
Right.
you become quite a scholar.
Right. Right. For sure.
Not only does this imprint kids, Joe, but when we talk to ourselves that way, it imprints us.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you.
No, agreed. Agreed. I think that's a beautiful point, and I've never really heard that before. So I always try to take away from all of these interviews at least some little point, and I think that's a beautiful one right there. Maybe there'll be more, but that's definitely a great one. You coined the term courage of your talents. Tell me what that means and how it relates to self-esteem.
One of the great theatrical events ever was The Wizard of Oz, in my
Okay.
opinion. And in that picture and in the book, the wizard, even after he's exposed, gives the lion who wants courage a
Right.
badge. And the lion now is much more courageous. But he doesn't give the lion talents. He just
Right.
gives the lion a badge saying,
Yeah, yeah. Some
and,
acknowledgement.
right. So what did the wizard do? He gave the lion permission to use his talents, to
Mm,
use his courage. And my point in the book is we all have these residual talents and strengths. We need the courage to use those talents. And it's an internal courage that it takes. And so forget about false humility, right? And forget about worrying that you're going to be arrogant. Confidence is the absolute assurance that you can help other people.
hmm.
Arrogance is the assurance that you can't learn anything else yourself. So skate right up to that line. And by the
Okay.
way, smugness is arrogance without the talent, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So the lion got the badge, used his inner strengths, his courage to use his talent, and that's what people have to do. And this book's an attempt to give everybody that badge.
Nice. I like that. You know, we were talking a little bit about information and social media and kind of the negative impact. I see people constantly, and I find myself doing it once in a while, is start scrolling through, all this information. And how does that affect, do you think, people's self-esteem and their self-worth?
It's awful because everything has been exacerbated by social media, where every single opinion passes as fact. And so the difficulty is that they look to influencers. I mean, what is the credibility? What's the background of an influencer? Why would you look to someone else to give you advice where you can make your own decisions. And this is why we don't trust our own judgment anymore. We look to the wrong metrics,
Mhm.
and we look for what other people do, and we look sort of the search for meaning. Life is not a search for meaning. Life is the creation of meaning for ourselves.
I love that.
And social media has created this tremendous normative pressure, this tremendous confirmation bias to only read things we agree with and to comment on things we agree with and
Yeah.
not think about the rest. And so, I forget who said this, it wasn't me, but they said a sign of high intellect is the ability to simultaneously entertain two opposing ideas.
I love that.
Right? I think it was Fitzgerald. I'm not sure. But we have to get back to that place where there's just because you disagree doesn't mean one side is morally superior to the other. And the
Agreed.
internet does not help that.
Yeah. Today's political climate with such polarization and, the internet just feeds into that ridiculously. And, it's, I think it's really causing societal harm. And I think it takes, a few strong people and enables them to do whatever they're doing. But I think most everybody else gets beaten down by it. They feel inferior, not capable, or, wrong in some way or another. And I don't know, I think it's really damaging to society. How do you look at this? I know you're dealing with entrepreneurs right now. Have you ever worked with, politicians, political parties, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I've advised politicians, for example, on media skills and presentation skills and things like this.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, most of them are surrounded by so-called aides who really, are there to help the politician only hear what he or she wants to hear. But beaten down is the phrase you use, and that's a very good phrase because people are afraid, they're weary, they're tired of getting pounded for their opinion, so they withhold it.
Yeah.
And so we don't have honest discourse. And too many times people aren't hearing information, especially in organizations, that they should be hearing because people are afraid of what the reaction might be. I know somebody, a woman, who has very strong political reviews to the point of being absolutely obnoxious. You can't talk to her. I mean, if you say, "Hey, I like your garden," she'll say, that's a typically Republican, typically Democratic point of view, right? So she goes into a medical office where she has an appointment, and it's a long-standing physician, and the two front office people are talking to each other about politics. And when she gets into the doctor, she says, "You got to fire these two people. They're talking politics out there." He says, "It's a free country. Did they try to convert you?" She said, "No,
Right.
but they're talking about the wrong party. They're not talking." And she says, "I won't be able to keep coming to you." He said, "I don't really care if you don't keep coming to you, if that's your attitude." And she left him.
Yeah.
Now, that's a mental illness.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. And there's a lot of that going around. I mean, I see families dividing camps. I
Yeah,
see
yeah.
longtime friends leaving each other over who they voted for. I'm like, it seems like when I was younger, opposing parties used to have friendly conversations and disagree with each other and go around and around and talk and maybe bring up good points that cause the other one to go, oh, maybe you're onto something.
Well, it gets worse and worse. I mean, there are instances well documented of professors in universities who tell a new class, "This is the political ideology of my class, and if it doesn't suit you, don't come back." Now,
Wow.
that's not what I call education.
No, no, it's indoctrination, if
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
Wow. Well, let's get into your book. You've written a lot of books. Tell us about this latest one.
Well, the courage of your talent is my attempt to give people the skills and the techniques and the motivation to have the courage to use their talents, the courage of their talents, both in their professional lives and their personal lives. I provide specific techniques in there. It's the book combines the history of esteem to a certain extent, how we began to even talk about the word, to how
Hmm.
it's applied today, and what people can use in terms of techniques to reinforce theirs. For example, a little mantra in the morning and in the evening of positives and things like this. It's how to improve your self-talk and your self-image. And it does include this self-test where if you send it in electronically, you'll get response on where you stand on the courage of your talent, what quadrant you're in and what you need to do from here. So I'm really excited about the book. It's you can pre-order it now on Amazon. And it's something that I'm going to be doing workshops about and Zoom sessions about and so forth.
Nice. I like it. So walk us through 6 courage creators, and you start with accountability. Why do you think owning your own problems is a foundation of courage?
Because when we rely on others, and I'm not talking about relying on professionals where we don't have the ability. You rely on your doctor to give you, good advice. You
Sure.
rely on lawyers and so forth. But when you don't accept accountability, you are forfeiting your power. And that's why people feel so powerless, and they feel that somebody else is supposed to provide this for them. But when other people provide it for them, it's not in their own best interest. Again, the metrics are wrong.
Mhm.
Now, if you think of people who procrastinate, for example,
Which
and
is most people.
you ask yourself, why aren't they accountable for getting this job done? It's because they are less fearful of being blamed for not completing something than they are fearful of completing it and being blamed for it not being good.
Ah, interesting.
It's another search for perfection. Perfection's a kind of procrastination. So you have to accept accountability because of what we spoke about earlier. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it.
Right.
And you can't expect other people to do things for you. There's one final thing I'll mention here, and that is a lot of people practice projection. And that is taking my strengths and weakness and projecting them elsewhere. So somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to learn to ski. And you say to them, well, don't start with the Blue Hills. You can't do those because I couldn't do them. Well, you couldn't do them, but this other person
Right.
might have more affinity for skiing, right? But now
Right,
you're
right.
changing their expectation. So you have to be self-accountable.
I think that's true. I talk about that a lot in all aspects of health. And we deny things, we brush things under the rug, we put things off and all of that. And really when you own things, you start living in a world of truth and you start looking through a different lens. And I think that starts setting your bar a little higher and it starts to put you on a path towards better things. As you're going along, you've talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of people and helped them. I always like to hear of, I'm sure that there's probably dozens or many, many stories that stick out, but there's probably one that you just look back and you smile and you say, wow, I made a difference in this situation. Tell me a little bit about one story where somebody came to you and you were really able to make a difference to them.
Well, I'll tell you one that is a partnership, so it's not self-aggrandizing. I had a client who was the president of a large insurance company in the U.S.
Hmm.
And he said to me, we had a banner year, so you don't expect a problem. It's a banner, great year.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, and 90% of the employees here are on a bonus system, and they're going to benefit from a larger bonus pool. But 10% of them are salaried employees, not part of the bonus pool. They're administrative people, they're secretaries, they're underwriters, and so forth. He said, I feel terrible that they're not going to participate. He said, what can I do? Should we throw a party? I said, you always can throw a party, but do you have any discretionary funds available that you can use, for whatever you think is appropriate? He said, well, yeah, I have X amount of funds available. I said, well, how many people are we talking about? And he told me, and I said, you could give them each $100 gift certificate with Christmas best wishes. And he said, will $100 be sufficient for them to buy things? I said, listen, it's the gesture that's important. So the announcement was made, and they said at 10 o'clock on Friday morning, come to Human Resources, and these will be handed out. And so he and I stood in the hall. And 10 o'clock came, nobody was moving. And then we heard this dull rumble on the stairs, and the elevators began to ding, and scores of people were heading for Human Resources to get these $100. And on the way, some of them stopped to yell at him, thank you, John. Thank you.
Wow.
And he and I were in tears
Wow.
And it wasn't because we made anybody rich, but it was this gesture of inclusion.
Yeah.
People aren't motivated by money. They're hurt by the absence of money. But if you give an unhappy employee more money, you have a wealthier, unhappy employee,
Right.
right? So he was giving the money, but it was the gesture they appreciated. And I've never forgotten that. And I say a partnership because he was very amenable to the idea.
Nice. I love that. I love that. I think that that's definitely some sage advice. You were talking about affirmations and, you know, it, there's so many self-help programs out there and success programs and, books and tapes and classes and all this stuff. It's ubiquitous. But a mantra or affirmation seems to be integral to all of it. How do you incorporate that in your life?
What I do is, and I recommend this for everybody, in the morning, I think about 30 seconds, 60 seconds, three powerful, positive things I want to do, either personally or professionally. And I don't make them too grand. I mean, I don't say I'm going to clean out the garage. I say I'm going to clean off 2 shelves, right?
All right.
Have to be reasonable, right? I'm not going to change the world peace. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to vote responsibly, right?
There
Um,
you go.
I'm going to call 2 people for referrals. At the end of the day, just before I go to sleep, again, 60 seconds, I ask myself, what 3 things have I have accomplished today? And they don't have to be the same things. I could say I gave some free coaching help to somebody who really needed it, right? I donated to this charity. So you start the day with 3 positive things that you intend to do. You end the day with 3 positive things you've actually done. They may be the same, they may not be. But that keeps you on this positive keel so that you don't get up in the morning saying, oh God, I wish
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
stay in bed. And I think if we develop those kinds of disciplines for ourselves, as I said earlier, it's all about self-talk. It's about how we talk to ourselves.
hmm No, I think that's fantastic. Well, you've thrown out so many good tidbits. Like this has been one of those interviews where I'm just like, wow, I'm gonna write that down. Luckily, it's all recorded, so I can go back and listen to it. But you've handed out just a wealth of little nuggets. If there was one thought you could leave our listeners with as like, this is the thing I would give you, if I had one thing to give you, what would that look like?
Well, it's always hard to reduce this to one thing, but I would say it would be something like this. We all need love in our lives.
hmm
So don't just find someone to love. Love yourself as well.
Ah, I agree. I agree. That comes up a lot, and I think that's good. And get a dog.
Yeah. And let me thank you, Joe, because not only for being here, but if you don't write it, you've given me a book title, and that is The World of Truth,
I
which is
love
simple.
it. Well, I can tell you, I ended up having to beat cancer to get that awareness of the importance of truth, but I got it. And so here we are.
Good for
Um,
you.
well, as always, I want to give you a chance to let our listeners know how to find you, how to get a hold of your consulting service, your books, and of course, the new book.
Well, it's alanweiss.com, ALANWEISS.com. There are free newsletters and free videos and free podcasts. Every Monday, there's the Monday Morning Memo. There's a podcast every Thursday called The Uncomfortable Truth. There's even a cartoon every Friday. So, alanweiss.com. And if you're interested in further help, if you're interested in more formal coaching, those options are on there too. You can also purchase any of those 57 plus books that Joe talked about. And do, please, if you're interested in building your self-esteem, The Courage of Your Talent, you can pre-order it on Amazon.
That's fantastic. Well, Alan, we touched on some topics. I'd love to go deeper with you. I know you've got a busy schedule, but maybe one day we'll have you back and we'll continue this conversation.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and I want to thank all of our listeners for making this show possible, and we will see you next time.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show,
please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.